Brandon Brown here from WolverineDigest.com. Excited to be talking about a few new additions to Michigan's football roster. Joining me, Matthew Lounsbury. Some of you may remember Matthew. He helped me out with basketball a couple years ago. He's going to be a part-time contributor now moving forward with the hopes of that maybe turning into a full-time gig. That's what we're hoping for. Look, Matthew, if Michigan keeps winning national titles, dude, I mean, we might be able to carve out a spot for you. That's what we're hoping for anyway.
I think we could work something out if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, as good as they've done over the last few years, obviously business has been solid. People are interested. People are talking. That hasn't quite been the case so much here lately. We were talking before we started recording. Recruiting's been a little slow. Yep. Sharon Moore's been the head coach for a while now. His staff has been in place now. Spring football has been over for a month, and it's been a little bit of a lull. But over the past week or so, week to 10 days, Michigan did add 4 players from the transfer portal, all in the secondary, and all very similar dudes. We were talking about this, too, before we started recording, and we'll get into that a little bit. But all 4 of them have some position versatility, similar builds, and it makes me curious exactly how they're going to be used and what that secondary is going to look like beyond Will Johnson, really. I mean, Makari Page as well probably feels like a pretty cemented starter. Will Johnson's never going to come off the field. But you lose Rod Moore, and you bring Quentin Johnson back, and so now you're kind of figuring out what all the rest of it's going to look like with these 4 guys. So we'll start off with Albany. He's listed as a cornerback, but he's also kind of viewed as a safety in some places. Amir Hall, 6'1", 200 pounds. That's something that we will hear a couple times talking about these guys. Had 57 tackles, 13 pass breakups, and 5 picks last year, and was an FCS All-American. So right out of the gate, like, I'm intrigued by this guy. He was one of the best players in the entire country at the FCS level. So I guess we're hopeful that transfers to big-time football at Michigan.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he sounds kind of like your Josh Wallace,
right?
You're the next step of Josh Wallace. A guy who came from a lower level school, who are looking to plug a hole opposite Will Johnson, and Hall could be that guy for Michigan. I think the only question you might have is coming up from a lower level is more so the speed of the game, speed of the receivers you're going to be lined up across from. So that would be the only question I have. But on paper, as far as FCS All-American and all that, it bodes well.
Saw that a little bit with Josh Wallace. Not the fastest guy in the world. Went to the combine, tested the waters, didn't get drafted. We'll see. But he was very good. He was very good for Michigan on a very good defense, and really, like you said, filled a hole that Michigan had. So we'll see what happens with Amir Hall out of Albany. Up next, former Tennessee safety Wesley Walker. Like this dude on paper, has made some big plays, and this is an SEC guy. So you're talking about a higher level guy, a little bit more athletic ability, a little bit more raw talent. Again, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's a 6th-year senior, so this is a guy who's been around a little bit longer. Had 53 tackles, 2 pass breakups, and a sack and a forced fumble last year. Had LSU and USC on his offer list as well, so other big-time schools were interested in him. He came from a big-time school. So this one's intriguing as well. You wonder, I mean, is he going to play next to – is this your other starting safety? It kind of feels like that. I mean, is he – can he come in and be better than Quentin Johnson off rip? Can he hold off some of these younger guys that are going to get a look? I'm intrigued by Tennessee's Wesley Walker.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. This is probably the one I'm intrigued about the most, just because, like you said, he came from the SEC. It's weird, because he had 3 years at Georgia Tech, 2 years at Tennessee, and yet he still got eligibility left. Yeah. It's kind of part of that whole COVID eligibility thing. So, but a guy who brings a ton of experience to Michigan's defensive backfield. And yeah, this is the one I'm most intrigued about, just because he did come from the SEC, and has that experience. So yeah, I'm intrigued as well.
So we're going to skip a guy. We're going to come back to Jaden Mangum. You have some insight on him. Michigan State guy. Michigan fans obviously love the fact that Jaden Mangum left Sparty to come to the Wolverines. He's a pretty talented kid, but we'll come back to him. We'll finish with him. But Ricky Johnson, former UNLV cornerback, again, 6'1", 190. So all these guys kind of in the 6'1", 6'2", 200-pound range, with some position versatility. Again, listed as a cornerback, but in some places it just says defensive back because he can move around a little bit back there. He's a grad transfer, played 10 games last year, 36 tackles, 7 pass breakups, and he was actually committed to Washington State after entering the portal in March. but has now flipped over to Michigan. I mean, I feel like a broken record. Like, all these guys are built similarly. They have some position versatility. You wonder, is this a guy who can play safety next to Makari Page? Can he play nickel and replace a guy like Mike Sainristil, a little bit taller? Or can he play cornerback opposite Will Johnson and be a starter in a place where Michigan has a pretty big need? So it's interesting. He played against the Wolverines last year, I believe. He did miss some time, but I think he was on the field for that game. I'll have to double check that. But again, another guy who's played a lot of football, was wanted by another Power 5 school, but then decided to switch from Washington State. Are we even considering like those forgotten Pac-12 schools as power? I don't even know what you call them anymore. But anyway,
it's a weird situation.
It is a weird situation. But last played for UNLV, will now play for Michigan again. You know what are you looking for when you again just see these guys on paper with all these similarities in the movability?
Yeah, I think again it's the experience that jumps out to me. You look at 4 seasons at UNLV, a lot of production, 78 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 14 pass breakups, 4 picks. Last year 36 tackles, 3 of them for loss, seven pass breakups, and only played 10 games. So like that's some pretty good production for just 10 games of play last year. So not sure. A lot of these guys, like you and I, didn't watch a whole lot of UNLV football last year, so it's a little tough to predict what these guys are going to look like in a Michigan uniform. But just the level of experience and the production that they had at other stops before arriving in Ann Arbor, it's good to have that experience and depth in the defensive backfield.
And it was an area where Michigan needed that. Mike Sainristil goes off to the NFL. Josh Wallace, we talked about, he's moved on. Rod Moore unfortunately gets hurt. You have Keon Sabb leaves via the transfer portal. So there were some spots to be had, and now Michigan appears to have addressed that, at least on paper. Again, we'll see what these guys look like when they get running around on the field. But it was definitely a room that needed a little bit of depth, and Michigan clearly saw that. They go out and get 4 guys that, if they're in blank uniforms, they might look like the 4 same guys. They're very similarly built. All of them have pretty decent experience. All of them have made some plays and played a lot of football. Last but not least, I mentioned him already. Michigan State transfer Jaden Mangum, a little bit lankier, 6'2", so the tallest, 185, also the lightest. So he's obviously a little bit thin. But he had 53 tackles and 4 picks last year. Ohio State was on his list. Nebraska was on his list. I think he's the youngest of the bunch as well, just a true junior, if I'm not mistaken. But he's played quite a bit of football for Michigan State, and so he's an in-state kid. He gets U of M. He gets Michigan State. He gets the Big Ten. He gets the rivalry. So another pretty intriguing guy.
Yeah, for sure. This is a guy who I watched a lot the last couple of years. We might as well let the cat out of the bag here a little bit, Brandon. It comes to this player. So I covered Michigan State for the last 2.5 years, and so I got to see quite a bit of Jaden Mangum. He's pretty much a free safety, in my opinion, and the slight build kind of points to that a little bit. He's not so much a guy who's going to come up into the box and make a ton of tackles, but he's very rangy, and he can be that backside last line of defense type of guy. That length is helpful. He had 5 picks for Michigan State last year, led the team. So he's kind of that center fielder, if you will, of the defensive backfield, and showed a lot of good things in his first 2 years. And despite Michigan State struggles defensively the last couple of years, he was a guy who showed some promise.
I think you and I talked about him a little bit when he made the decision. I think you said he may have been the best player, granted on a not a very good defensive unit, but some guy he stuck out. He flashed at times of doing some really good things and looking like he could contribute for a better team.
Yeah, he was a Big Ten honorable mention, all Big Ten honorable mention guy. Michigan State's best 2 defensive players were probably Derek Harmon and Simeon Barrow, the 2 defensive tackles. Ironically, both of them entered the transfer portal and no longer in East Lansing either. So that's probably their 3 best defenders from last year, if you want to look at it that way. He was probably Mangum. One of the better defensive backs, though, that Michigan State had the last couple of years. And he brings, again, some more experience of starting experience and that rangy ability to kind of play that center field.
Very good. So I forgot I pulled the pictures so we could talk about these guys as we looked at them a little bit. So I'm going to throw them up here as a recap. So we first talked about We first talked about Amir Hall. Josh Wallace 2.0. That was how I labeled the article. Matthew brought it up that way as well. If he can be that serviceable, this is a transfer portal win. A guy who can play a lot of
Yeah.
snaps opposite Will Johnson. He's got some length. He's got some experience. He was one of the best cornerbacks in the country at the FCS level, so there's certainly some intrigue and some ability there. Wesley Walker, we talked about him, coming from a big-time program, coming from the SEC, spent some time was it Georgia Tech before that?
Yep.
So this Power 5 guy. He's been here. He's played a lot of football, and he made some plays for the Vols last year. So this is a guy that, again, maybe he's your starting safety next to Makari Page. I think if that works its way out that way, that's another big get for the portal. We then moved on to Ricky Johnson from UNLV. I think you're just hoping you find some depth here. Maybe if somebody goes down, he can step in. I mean, again, on paper, doesn't look like he'll be a starter, but you never know. You bring him in. He's got some position versatility. He's also got some experience, and he can play a couple different spots for you. Was originally committed to Washington State. Will now suit up for the Wolverines. And last but not least, Matthew just did a great breakdown of Jaden Mangum coming from Michigan State, Big Ten guy, in-state guy. I can't remember what high school he went to. I covered him a little bit when he was in high school as a recruit. Was it Groves?
I think it was Groves, yeah.
I think it was Groves. That was just I just plucked. I don't even know why I know that, but I think that's where it was. I believe I have a photo of him in my phone somewhere when I was covering him as a young recruit. So anyway, I'm intrigued by all four of these guys. If I'm being honest, I mean, I don't expect any of them to come in and be like program changers or like the stars of the defense. But I really think all four of them have the potential to contribute on some level. I think we talked about Wesley Walker from Tennessee maybe being the most intriguing of the bunch. Certainly Michigan fans love the fact that they took Jaden Mangum away from the Spartans. And then Amir Hall, again, if he can be as good as Josh Wallace and maybe earn that starting spot opposite Will Johnson with some other younger guys mixed in there, I think that would be best case scenario. I mean, is there any sense that two or three of these guys could start or earn those kind of snaps for Michigan? I think that's what they're probably hoping for.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that second safety spot because we both expect, McCarty Page to continue to be a starter for Michigan. And so you're looking at that other spot that would have been, occupied by Rod Moore. He goes down with the injury. You mentioned Keon Sabb, you mentioned DJ Waller. So Michigan had some work to do in the secondary to get ready
Waller
for this 2024 season. Yeah. And so you've got some options here. It's like a lot of these guys, these guys coming after spring practice is a little interesting because they didn't have a chance to really meld with the team and get those practice reps. And so it's kind of a tall ask because you're going through summer conditioning and then you have fall camp, 4 weeks of fall camp to try to, find a role. So it'll be interesting to see if any of these guys can kind of crack that starting lineup. I do think we'll see multiple of these guys in the two deep at least. Going back to Mangum, I can see him as being like perhaps because Makari might be more of that free safety type too, and so maybe he's the next guy.
He's kind of like Makari Page light. That's not what he's
really is.
A little bit shorter, a little bit lighter, not quite as physical, but still rangy, can play center field, can make some plays back there. That's what it feels like for him.
Right. And you've got to, on top of like trying to get your lineup set, you also have to prepare for the worst. And that's, you saw that would happen with Rod Moore during the spring. Those things, they happen during football seasons. You got to prepare for that. And I think this is a nice little a range of depth that Michigan went and got this spring.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested in all four. I'm ready to see how they fit in, where they fit in. I wouldn't be surprised if one or two of them start, and I think all four of them will play. And like you said, I mean, Makari Page tweaks an ankle and has to sit out for a game or two, then Jaden Mangum steps in there and can start and play some football for you. And I think you can say that about Ricky Johnson as well. And then maybe Wesley Walker and Amir Hall earn starting spots. I think that would be best case scenario for Michigan. So just wanted to break down these four new defensive backs added to the Michigan roster within the past couple of weeks via the transfer portal. I don't think Michigan's completely done, changing their roster up a little bit, but they return a lot of really good players on defense. They've added these four guys. Offense, yes, there are some question marks, but there's talent there. Man, What are we, like 100 days from the opening weekend of college football? I think 100 days or less maybe for Michigan's opener, and maybe
I think we might be a little bit closer. Remember now, college football is starting a week earlier this
Yeah.
year because of the expanded playoff, and so it's weird that it's not going to be Labor Day, because that was always part of like the Labor Day weekend experience. At least my experience was, having the long weekend, but having college football kind of. Anyway, I'm rambling here, but like, yeah, we're starting a week earlier, so I'm excited about that too, because anytime you can get college football back, it's a good time.
August 31st. August 31st is Michigan's first regular season game. That will be against Fresno State, and then they play this Texas school during week 2. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll
that
see
one
what
will be
looks like.
interesting. I mean, that one's a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, this schedule is incredible. I mean, after covering them the last couple of years, their home slate and they're out of conference. You're like, oh man. But yeah, this year it's 5. I don't even like saying the word, but it's 5 losable games. They have 5 losable games, I think, this year, and then you always got to be careful for some unexpected nonsense. So it couldn't be more excited to be within 100 days of getting Michigan football back on the field. Thank you so much for Matthew taking out some time. He'll be around a little bit more, so get used to him, get used to the name, and yeah, we'll keep bringing you content about Michigan football throughout the rest of the summer.